Dinarland highlights. From DOS. Iraq Chapter 7 has nothing to do with bankruptcy. There is a long-established checklist of goals and requirements. They are referred to as chapters. I don't think I've ever read anywhere those chapters must be accomplished or resolved in a linear fashion necessarily. In my eye, there's done, and then there's done. It depends on the context and how the information provider sees progress from their perspective relative to how deep their understanding of the process is done. From the deep end could mean all the little necessary pieces are in place, all the decision makers agree to the pieces and their placement, everything can be done, and still be placed in a box on a shelf for a future date to be pulled down and implemented. From our shallow perspective, the shallow end, done, is the implementation that results in a trigger of some other or additional progress toward another goal, like a full international release. So, if that logic holds true, there could have been a stage of done years ago, but we still wait on the done stage we want. At the end of the day, it's all sausage making. We will never understand it, and we're not supposed to. It's bigger than we are. We have to stay grounded in the basics. Hang loose, watch, listen, prepare. When a satisfactory condition and alignment of all the various interests and power structures involved have reached a point of reasonable satisfaction that their interests and goals are met, they will just as simply turn the money back on. It's easy to believe in just the facts. I suspect much of the stuff we have heard from all over the net over the years contains an element of truth, some more than others, of course. I determined long ago that there have been very few delays in the process. But there have been a lot of course corrections and false starts, and the RV was even used at times as a tool to pry open a fault or weak spot that needed repair or arrest. With all processes, you must set goals, and those goals are markers to measure progress towards a final successful resolution. Sometimes those goals are hit, and sometimes they are missed, but either way you adapt, adjust, and try to navigate a new or more successful path to the end of it. Ultimately, IT is just a process. I always go back to a single piece of information that in part shows clearly a few simple facts. And for me, it's the foundation of my confidence and trust. With that said, let's look at what we know. Iraq has always been a wealthy, rich culture with a strong heritage and significant history. Iraq always had ample resources and a strong economy in its own right. Their money always had value, historically and consistently. Due to pressures to enact a liberation of Iraq and effect a regime change, a coalition of nations turned off the money, dinar, as part of a war effort and strategic assault to debase the finances of revolt, resistance, and insurgency against that change in 2004. There was, and still is, a plan to give rebirth and revitalize that economy, influence that culture, and eventually embrace Iraq, its people, and their wealth and trade into the global economic fold. And, when a satisfactory condition and alignment of all the various interests and power structures involved have reached a point of reasonable satisfaction that their interests and goals are met, they will just as simply turn the money back on. It will all come together with a public release and permission for all of us to exchange in any manner we want, almost anywhere we want. And it will be a safe, organized, ultimately fair and reasonably simple business transaction. Hang in there, but keep living. We're ready when they're ready. From Jew and Greek. Okay, first of all, let's define what it means for a currency to be traded internationally. Currencies that are traded on the foreign exchange, also called forex, are from countries that have a manufacturing base, where they produce things that other countries want. Japan builds cars, electronics, motorcycles, etc. China has a strong agricultural base as well as a huge clothing industry. Korea, Canada, Australia, Mexico, Brazil, etc. all have a strong manufacturing base to their economies. In order to purchase the goods that they produce, you need to exchange your currency into their currency. That's why the U.S. Treasury holds a lot of those currencies in their reserves, to facilitate trade with those countries. Now let's look at the oil-producing countries of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Syria, UAE, Bahrain, Iraq, Yemen, and Oman, none of them have a significant manufacturing base. Their economies are oil-based, and they sell their oil for US dollars per the petrodollar agreement, so nobody really needs their currencies. As a result, their currencies aren't traded on Forex and they aren't held in the reserves of nations around the world. You won't hear about this in the dinar community because everybody wants to entertain this fantasy about the dinar going international and skyrocketing in value, but ask any economist or importer/exporter and they'll tell you that this is how it works. In order for Iraq to have an internationally traded currency, they need to create demand for their currency by creating products that the world wants, and to build a manufacturing base like the countries I mentioned earlier, they'll need to stop fighting each other, defeat ISIS, educate their people, build a modern infrastructure, and start innovating like Japan and Germany did after World War II. That can't happen in a few months or years. It will take at least 20 years, and probably considerably longer. That's why I know that they're not going international anytime soon. From Ray Ren 98, this is the last day of the quarter, and some folks are saying it has been done in this quarter to backdate pay to the beginning of the year. That expectation came to me as well. Others are looking into April. On Iraqi television, the US Treasury gave Iraq an award for getting their banks online. PM Abadi has called for the UN to lift Chapter 7, and some argue that is not even necessary. We are not going to the bank just yet, but there is still some expectation that may change over the weekend. We'll have to wait and see. However, expectation is high in Iraq, in the banks here, and across the board. We are still seeing an any hour, any day situation. All that makes me expect this will go at any time. Something could happen between now and Sunday, for sure. From Mike. If Abadi can find a way to do the right thing for the Kurds and Sunnis, we have a real chance at watching Iraq grow and flourish economically. Abadi is going to gain a ton of political capital when he captures Mosul. With that he can make real change and begin the process of providing security and stability, two things that are the cornerstone of a healthy country, economy, and currency. From iqdcalls.com, have a good weekend everyone.